What if I told you that the next world war might not be fought over oil, water, or territory, but over something far smaller, so small you can barely see it? A tiny piece of silicon, a microchip. These chips, called semiconductors, are the brain of modern technology. They power everything from your smartphone to fighter jets. They drive artificial intelligence, advanced weapons, and even national security. And now, nations are racing to control them, not just to dominate the tech industry, but to dominate the future. This is the silent war over semiconductors, and it could reshape the global balance of power forever. Look around you. Your smartphone, laptop, smartwatch, TV, car, even your microwave and washing machine, they all rely on one thing: semiconductors. These tiny chips act like the brains of modern devices. They process information, store data, and control how your devices function. Without them, today's technology simply wouldn't work. But semiconductors don't just run our gadgets, they run the world. In the economy, semiconductors are the foundation of entire industries: electronics, telecommunications, healthcare, transportation, energy, finance, you name it. When chip production slows down, everything from car factories to smartphone companies comes to a halt. But the importance of semiconductors goes beyond daily life and business. They are now a strategic military asset. Modern missiles, fighter jets, drones, radar systems, nuclear submarines, and cyber defense networks all rely on advanced chips to operate. Without semiconductors, a superpower becomes powerless. In short, no chips, no tech, no tech, no economy, no economy, no power. That's why semiconductors have become the most critical and contested resource of the 21st century. To understand the global semiconductor race, we need to look at who controls what. Because unlike oil, semiconductors aren't found underground. They're designed, engineered, and manufactured in only a handful of countries. Let's start with Taiwan. This small island nation has become the heart of global chip manufacturing. Why? Because of one company, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. TSMC is the world's most advanced chip maker. It produces more than 60% of all semiconductors globally and almost 90% of the most advanced chips, the kind used in AI, smartphones, and military systems. Even Apple, Nvidia, and Qualcomm rely on TSMC to build their high-end processors. If TSMC stops, the entire global tech industry feels the shock. Next comes the United States. The US is the leader in chip design. American companies like Intel, AMD, Nvidia, Qualcomm, and Apple create the blueprints for the most powerful chips on the planet. These companies don't always make the chips themselves, but their designs are used everywhere, from phones to servers to fighter jets. In simple terms, the US invents the brains and Taiwan builds them. Then there's South Korea, home to Samsung and SK Hynix. These companies specialize in memory chips, which store data in your devices. Samsung is also rapidly expanding into advanced chip manufacturing, making South Korea a major semiconductor powerhouse. Now let's talk about China. China is the biggest consumer of semiconductors in the world. Its tech giants, like Huawei, Xiaomi, and Alibaba, need massive amounts of chips. But here's the problem. China still lags behind in cutting-edge chip making. To change that, China is investing hundreds of billions of dollars to catch up, building fabs, training engineers, and creating homegrown chip companies. Its goal? Self-reliance, and to break free from US and Taiwanese control. And finally, a surprising player, the Netherlands. Why the Netherlands? Because of a company called ASML. ASML is the only company in the world that makes EUV lithography machines, the ultra-precise tools needed to make the most advanced chips. Each machine costs over $150 million, and there are only a few hundred of them in existence. Without ASML, you simply can't make cutting-edge chips. That gives the Netherlands an enormous amount of leverage and influence in this global game. Together, these countries form the core of the global semiconductor ecosystem. Taiwan builds the best chips, the US designs them, South Korea powers memory, China wants to catch up, and the Netherlands holds the keys to next-gen production. This tight network is powerful, but also fragile. If even one piece breaks, the whole system could collapse. The global battle over semiconductors is no longer just about business. It's a full-blown geopolitical conflict. And the two biggest players, the United States and China, are now locked in a high-stakes chip war. It started with US export bans. Washington realized that semiconductors are not just important, they're strategic weapons. So the US began restricting China's access to advanced chips and the machines needed to make them. In 2019, the US blacklisted Huawei, cutting it off from buying American-designed chips. Later, the restrictions widened, targeting Chinese supercomputing firms, military contractors, and AI companies. Then came the big move in 2022. The US announced sweeping export controls, not just for American companies, but also for any foreign company using US technology, including TSMC in Taiwan and ASML in the Netherlands. Translation: if you use American tools or software, you can't sell high-end chips or chip-making equipment to China. This hit China hard. Chinese companies suddenly found themselves cut off from the most advanced chips and tools. No more AI processors, no more EUV machines, no more global supply chain access. The message was clear. The US wants to slow down China's rise in tech and military power, and it's using semiconductors to do it. But China isn't sitting still. Beijing responded by launching its own chip independence campaign, pouring over $100 billion into domestic semiconductor programs. It's building new chip fabs, developing local alternatives to US tech, and pressuring its own companies to buy Chinese. In 2023, China even banned chips from American company Micron in some infrastructure projects, a clear sign that the tech war is going both ways. This is leading to a dramatic decoupling of the global tech ecosystem. For decades, the world depended on one interconnected semiconductor supply chain, but now it's splitting into two. One bloc led by the US and its allies, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Netherlands. Another led by China, trying to build its own parallel chip empire. This isn't just an economic rivalry anymore. It's a fight for technological dominance and ultimately global power. In 2020, the world was hit by something that seemed unthinkable, a massive shortage of semiconductors. Suddenly, automakers couldn't finish cars, tech companies couldn't build laptops or game consoles, even washing machines and refrigerators were delayed. But what caused this global chip shortage? It was a perfect storm of disruptions. First, the COVID-19 pandemic. When lockdowns hit, car companies expected demand to crash, so they cancelled chip orders. At the same time, people stuck at home were buying more electronics than ever: laptops, webcams, tablets, gaming devices. Chip makers shifted production to meet this unexpected demand. Then, as economies reopened and car sales bounced back, automakers rushed to reorder chips. But by then, the chip factories were already full, prioritizing other industries. Second, the chip industry is built on long, fragile supply chains. A disruption in one corner of the world, like a fire at a Japanese chip factory or a drought in Taiwan, can delay production everywhere. And third, the geopolitical tensions made everything worse. Export bans, hoarding, and panic buying added fuel to the fire. So what was the impact? The automotive industry was among the hardest hit. Major companies like Ford, GM, and Toyota had to shut down factories, cut production, and delay new models, all because they were missing a few tiny chips. In consumer electronics, everything from smartphones to gaming consoles to TVs became harder to find and more expensive. Even medical devices, like ventilators and diagnostic tools, were affected. The shortage exposed just how vulnerable the world is when semiconductor supply chains are disrupted. And it reminded governments of a brutal truth. Whoever controls the chips controls the future. After the chip shortage and rising geopolitical tensions, countries around the world woke up to a hard reality. They were too dependent on a fragile global supply chain. So now, a new race has begun, not for gold, not for oil, but for silicon, the foundation of the modern world. Let's look at how major powers are responding. The United States CHIPS Act. In 2022, the US passed the CHIPS and Science Act, a $280 billion package aimed at bringing chip manufacturing back to American soil. Here's what it includes. Over $50 billion in direct investments for semiconductor production and R&D. Tax incentives to encourage private companies to build factories in the US. Funding for workforce development to train a new generation of chip engineers. Why is this important? Because while American companies are world leaders in chip design, they manufacture very little of the chips they invent. Most production happens overseas, especially in Taiwan. That makes the US vulnerable. The CHIPS Act is designed to reduce that risk, secure national security, and reclaim technological leadership. Intel, TSMC, and Samsung are all building multi-billion-dollar fabs in Arizona, Ohio, and Texas, thanks to this new funding. The European Union, EU CHIPS Act. Europe also realized it was far behind in this game. So the European Union launched the EU CHIPS Act, aiming to double its share of global chip production from 10% to 20% by 2030. With over $43 billion in planned investments, the EU is supporting local chip companies like Infineon and ST Microelectronics, attracting foreign giants like Intel to build fabs in countries like Germany and Ireland, strengthening supply chain resilience across member states. Europe doesn't want to be caught off guard again. It's betting big on building a secure and independent chip ecosystem. No country is pushing harder than China. For years, China has relied heavily on foreign chips, especially from the US, Taiwan, and South Korea. But after years of export bans, blacklists, and rising tensions, China is now going all in on self-reliance. Beijing has committed hundreds of billions of dollars to develop its own semiconductor industry. It's building thousands of chip factories, training engineers, funding startups, and even acquiring foreign talent. Companies like SMIC, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, are at the center of this push. They've made progress, but are still years behind in cutting-edge technologies like 5nm and 3nm chips. To close the gap, China is investing in memory chips, chip design tools, EUV alternatives, and even raw material supplies. Despite US restrictions, China recently shocked the world by releasing a 7nm chip in one of Huawei's phones, a sign that it's catching up, slowly but steadily. A full-blown global arms race for chips. Every major power wants to secure its own supply, reduce dependence, and gain the upper hand in this high-stakes tech war. This race isn't just about economics. It's about power, security, and the future of civilization itself. For over a century, oil has been the lifeblood of global power. Nations have risen and fallen based on access to oil. Wars have been fought over it. Economies have revolved around it. But today, we're entering a new era. An era where semiconductors, not oil, are the most strategic resource on Earth. Let's break down why chips are the new oil. 1. Chips power. everything. Just as oil powers cars, planes, and industries, chips power the modern digital world. Your phone, your car, your TV, your refrigerator, even your washing machine needs chips to function. They're the brains of every modern device, from smartwatches to satellites. But beyond daily life, chips are also essential in critical infrastructure. Power grids, telecom networks, transportation systems, financial systems, medical devices remove semiconductors from the equation, and the world would grind to a halt. 2. Economic leverage. Oil exporting countries once controlled the world economy. Today, countries that dominate the chip supply chain hold similar power. Consider Taiwan. It's a small island with limited natural resources. But because of TSMC, the world's most advanced chip maker, Taiwan has become a strategic superpower. If TSMC stopped operating today, the global economy would crash. Chips are also central to economic growth. Whoever controls cutting-edge semiconductors controls the development of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 5G and 6G networks, autonomous vehicles, robotics and automation. In other words, control over chips means control over the future economy. 3. Military dominance. Modern warfare isn't just about bullets and bombs anymore. It's about algorithms, drones, satellites, and cyber warfare, all powered by chips. Military systems today rely on advanced semiconductors for missile guidance, surveillance and intelligence, secure communications, AI-based threat detection, battlefield robotics, cyber defense and offense. That's why nations are racing to secure trusted chips. Because one backdoor or failure in a military-grade chip could mean the difference between victory and defeat. It's no coincidence that countries like the US and China are pouring billions into defense-grade semiconductors. In modern warfare, hardware is the new ammunition. 4. Strategic choke points. Just like the world once depended on the Middle East for oil, it now depends on a few key countries for chips. Taiwan, TSMC, South Korea, Samsung, Netherlands, ASML, Japan, materials and equipment, US, chip design and R&D. This makes the global chip supply chain extremely vulnerable. Any geopolitical shock, like a conflict over Taiwan or sanctions on China, could send ripples across the world economy, just like an oil embargo once did. 5. The race for control. In the Cold War, it was about nuclear weapons. Today, it's about who leads in semiconductors. That's why governments are not leaving chip making to the private sector anymore. They're taking control through laws, investments, alliances, and even restrictions. Because just like oil shaped the 20th century, chips will define the 21st. So what's the bottom line? Semiconductors aren't just tiny pieces of silicon. They are the new foundation of power in the modern world. They decide who builds the future and who gets left behind. Let's recap. Semiconductors, those tiny, nearly invisible microchips, are at the heart of everything we rely on today. They power our phones, our cars, our hospitals, and even our defense systems. They fuel innovation, drive economic growth, and shape military power. And as the world becomes more digital, more automated, and more connected, these chips are no longer just pieces of technology. They're strategic assets, as valuable as oil once was. Maybe more. We've seen how Taiwan dominates cutting-edge chip manufacturing. The US leads in chip design and is trying to bring production home. China is spending billions to become self-reliant. Europe is fighting to stay relevant. And nations are racing to control this critical supply chain because they know it's the key to future dominance. This isn't just a tech story. It's a global power struggle, unfolding quietly but fiercely. The chip shortage opened our eyes. The geopolitical tensions turned it into a race. And the future? It will be decided not in oil fields, but in clean rooms and fabs. We are witnessing the rise of a new era. In the 21st century, the world runs not on fossil fuels, but on silicon. The next great powers won't be those with the biggest armies or the deepest oil reserves. They'll be the ones with the smartest chips.